The stars were cold and distant when Chief Navigator Veltar felt his heart sink. The Eternal Dawn, a massive ship carrying 50,000 of his people, drifted helplessly through space. The engines had died 3 days ago, and now the life. Support systems were failing too. Green warning lights flashed across every control panel in the command center. Veltar looked at the main screen, showing the empty blackness around them. His people, the Zephyrians, had fled their dying homeworld 6 months ago. They were peaceful beings, tall and thin with silver skin that seemed to glow in the ship's dim light. For generations, they had lived quietly on their planet, studying the stars and writing poetry about the beauty of the universe. Now they were dying in the darkness between worlds. "How long do we have?" Veltar asked the chief engineer, Mortek. Mortek's large eyes looked sad as he checked his instruments. "Maybe 2 days before the air runs out. The power cells are almost empty. We cannot fix the main engines without parts we do not have." Veltar closed his eyes for a moment. 50,000 lives depending on him. 50,000 families who had trusted him to guide them to safety. Children who would never see another sunrise. Elders who carried the wisdom of their entire race in their memories. "Send out a distress signal," he said quietly. "Use all frequencies. Maybe someone will hear us." Mortek nodded and began working at his station. Within minutes, a signal shot out from the eternal dawn into the vast emptiness of space. It carried mathematical patterns that any intelligent species should recognize. It included their location, their situation, and a simple message that needed no translation. "We are dying. Please help." The signal raced through space at the speed of light, carrying the desperate hope of 50,000 souls. Far away, on a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison sat in front of a wall of screens and speakers. The Arecibo 2 facility was Earth's most advanced listening post, designed to catch signals from deep space. Jake had been working the night shift for 3 years, and most nights were quiet. Sometimes he picked up radio waves from distant galaxies, or the occasional burst from a dying star. Tonight was different. The signal came through at 2:47 a.m., cutting through the usual static like a sword through silk. Jake sat up straight in his chair, his coffee mug forgotten. The patterns on his screen were clearly artificial. Mathematical sequences, star charts, and something that looked like a countdown timer. "Holy cow," Jake whispered, his hands shaking. As he adjusted the receivers, the signal was coming from the Kepler 442 system, about 1,200 light-years away. That meant it had been traveling through space for over 1,000 years. But the patterns were so clear, so obviously made by intelligent minds. Jake called his supervisor, Colonel Lisa Bryant, who lived 10 minutes away from the facility. The phone rang 6 times before she answered. "This better be good, Morrison," she said, her voice thick with sleep. "Colonel, you need to get down here right now. I've got something you need to see." "It's 3 in the morning, Jake. Can't it wait until—" "I've got an alien signal, ma'am. A real one. They're asking for help." The line went quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'll be there in 5 minutes." Colonel Bryant arrived in record time, still wearing her pajamas under a military jacket. She looked at Jake's screens, then at the recordings he had made. Her face went pale as she realized what she was seeing. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Look at these patterns. No natural phenomenon creates mathematics like this. And see this countdown? It's getting smaller. Whatever sent this signal is running out of time." Bryant picked up the secure phone that connected directly to Space Command headquarters. "Get me Admiral Frank Hayes. I don't care what time it is. Tell him it's priority alpha. Within an hour, the small listening post was buzzing with activity. Military vehicles arrived carrying teams of scientists, linguists, and intelligence officers. Admiral Hayes himself flew in on a helicopter. His gray hair messy from the wind got Jake explained everything he had discovered. The signal was definitely artificial. The mathematical patterns included prime numbers, the value of pi, and star charts that showed the location of the sender. Most importantly, there was a section that seemed to show life support systems failing. How long do they have? Admiral Hayes asked. Jake looked at his calculations. Based on the countdown in their signal, maybe 2 days. But sir, this signal has been traveling for over 1,000 years. Whatever crisis they were facing is already over. Admiral Hayes studied the data for a long time. Then he made a decision. That would change human history forever. Get me the president on the secure line, he said. President Catherine Wells was in the White House Situation Room within 2 hours. She listened to the briefing with growing amazement and concern. When the presentation was over, she asked the question that everyone was thinking. Is there any way we can help them? Dr. Robert Kim, the head of NASA's Advanced Propulsion Program, cleared his throat. Madam President, we've been working on an experimental faster-than-light drive. It's never been tested over long distances, but theoretically, it could reach the Kepler 442 system in about 3 days. Theoretically? The President asked. The risks are enormous. We could lose the entire crew. The drive might fail halfway there. We don't even know if the aliens are still alive, or if they're hostile. President Wells looked around the room at the faces of America's top military and scientific leaders. Then she thought about the desperate signal racing through space, carrying the last hope of a dying people. What would we need for a rescue mission? She asked. Admiral Hayes stepped forward. We'd need the Starship Liberty. It's our newest vessel, just finished construction. We'd need to load it with medical supplies, engineering equipment, and food. The crew would be volunteers only. How many people? 200 should be enough. Engineers, doctors, soldiers, and scientists. The president was quiet for a long moment. Outside the Situation Room, the normal business of government continued. People went to work, children went to school, families had dinner together. None of them knew that their president was making the most important decision in human history. We've never met these aliens, she said finally. We don't know anything about them, except that they're in trouble. They could be dangerous. They could be our enemies. Yes, ma'am, Admiral Hayes agreed, but they're asking for help. Yes, ma'am. President Wells stood up and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Washington, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere out there in the darkness between stars, 50,000 beings were running out of air and time. Launch the mission, she said. If we can help them, we will. If we can't, at least we'll know we tried. Within hours, the order went out across the military. The Starship Liberty was prepared for humanity's first interstellar mission. Captain Rick Thompson, a veteran of 3 wars, was chosen to lead the expedition. The ship was loaded with medical supplies, engineering equipment, and everything the crew might need to help the dying aliens. The world watched as the Liberty prepared. To launch, news crews gathered at Cape Canaveral. People prayed in churches, mosques, and temples. Children looked up at the stars and wondered if there really were other people out there, waiting for help. In the Kepler 442 system, the eternal dawn continued its slow drift through space. Chief Navigator Veltar had stopped checking the countdown timer. His people were preparing for the end, writing final messages to loved ones and sharing their last meals together. He did not know that help was coming. He did not know that on a small planet far away, an entire species had heard his call and decided to risk everything to answer it. The Liberty launched at sunset, its experimental engines tearing a hole in space itself. The ship vanished in a flash of blue light carrying 200 human volunteers into the unknown. The galaxy would never be the same. The starship Liberty shot through space faster than anything humans had ever built before. Captain Rick Thompson stood on the bridge, watching the stars stretch into long lines of light as they traveled at impossible speeds. The experimental faster-than-light drive hummed beneath his feet, a sound that no human had ever heard before. "How are we doing, Maria?" he asked his chief engineer. Maria Santos looked up from her control panel, sweat beading on her forehead. "The drive is holding together, but barely. These engines weren't designed for a trip this long. I'm having to reroute power every few minutes to keep us from tearing apart." Rick nodded. The Liberty was humanity's newest and most advanced starship, but it had been built for missions within the solar system. Now they were asking it to cross 1,200 light-years in 3 days. It was like asking a bicycle to win a race against a rocket. "Danny, any word from Earth?" Rick asked. Communications Officer Danny Chun shook his head. "Nothing since we jumped to light speed, sir. We're too far away now. Whatever happens out here, we're on our own." Rick looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all volunteers. Every single one of them. When word had gone out that humanity needed people willing to risk their lives for complete strangers, thousands had applied. Only 200 had been chosen. Dr. Patricia Wong, the ship's chief medical officer, was in the medical bay studying everything they knew about the aliens, which was almost nothing. The signal had contained some biological data, but it was hard to understand. She was preparing to treat patients whose bodies might work completely differently from humans. In the cargo holds, Quartermaster Steve Rodriguez was checking their supplies for the 100th time. They had brought medicine, food, water, tools, and spare parts. But would any of it be useful for aliens? Human medicine might be poison to them. Human food might be impossible for them to digest. The first crisis came 6 hours into the journey. "Captain!" Maria called out, her voice sharp with worry. "The starboard engine is overheating. If it fails, we'll drop out of light speed." Rick rushed to the engineering station. The screen showed red warning lights across the engine systems. "How bad is it?" "Bad. The engine wasn't designed to run this hot for this long. I need to shut it down to cool it off." "If you shut it down, can we restart it?" Maria looked grim. "Maybe, but we'll lose 6 hours, and we might not make it in time to help those aliens." Rick made his decision quickly. "Keep it running. Do whatever you have to do." Maria nodded and began working frantically at her controls. She rerouted coolant from other systems, reduced power to non-essential equipment, and even opened some of the ship's exterior vents to space. The engine temperature dropped slowly back to acceptable levels. The second crisis came 12 hours later when they hit. A radiation storm. "Captain, we've got a problem," called Lieutenant Tom Baker from the navigation station. "There's a massive radiation field dead ahead. If we go through it, it could kill everyone on the ship." Rick studied the sensor readings. The radiation storm was enormous, stretching across their entire path. Going around it would add 8 hours to their journey. 8 hours the dying aliens didn't have. How long to pass through it? He asked. 20 minutes at our current speed." Rick activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to pass through a radiation field. Everyone needs to get to the shielded sections of the ship immediately. This is not a drill." The crew ran through the corridors, helping each other reach the most protected parts of the Liberty. They huddled together in the cargo bays and engine. Rooms, areas surrounded by the thickest metal walls. For 20 minutes, the ship shook as waves of deadly radiation washed over it. The lights flickered. Computer systems crashed and restarted. In the medical bay, Dr. Wong watched her equipment fail one by one. When they finally emerged from the storm, half the ship's systems were damaged. But they were alive, and they were still moving toward the aliens who needed their help. Back on Earth, the world watched and waited. President Catherine Wells held press conferences every few hours, but there was little news to share. The Liberty was beyond radio contact, racing through the darkness toward an unknown fate. News anchor Helen Price stood outside the White House, speaking to billions of viewers around the world. It has been 18 hours since the Liberty began, humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. We have no word from Captain Thompson and his crew, and won't until they reach their destination or return to Earth. In living rooms and coffee shops, on street corners and in offices, people talked about the mission. Some thought it was humanity's greatest moment. Others worried it was a terrible mistake. Children asked their parents if the space travelers would come home safely. Religious leaders of every faith held special services, praying for the success of the mission. Scientists worked around the clock, trying to figure out what the rescue team might face when they reached the alien ship Dot, but nobody knew, at 1,500 light-years away, other beings were watching humanity's actions with growing alarm. In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered for an emergency session. The chamber was vast, with floating platforms for each delegation. Some species breathed air, others required water or special gases. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that humans would have trouble understanding what they were looking at. Ambassador Crexthul of the Dominion stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall and imposing, with dark scales and glowing red eyes. His people had conquered dozens of worlds and ruled over millions of beings. "Fellow council members," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber, "we face an unprecedented situation. A young species, barely out of their home system, has launched an interstellar rescue mission for beings they have never met." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many of the delegates had been following humanity's actions with growing concern. "In the entire history of the galaxy," Crexthul continued, "no species has ever done such a thing. When races first achieve interstellar travel, they focus on expansion, on claiming territory, on building their own empires. They do not risk their most advanced ship and their best people to save strangers." Fleet Commander Zeph Call of the Dominion military spoke next. "This behavior is dangerous and unpredictable. A species that acts without regard for their own safety, that risks everything for emotional reasons, cannot be trusted. They are either incredibly naive or incredibly deceptive." Ambassador Lyrison of the Ethereal Collective disagreed. Her people were peaceful, much like the Zephyrians, who are now in danger. "Perhaps," she said in her musical voice, "this species called humans represents something new in the galaxy. Perhaps they show us a better way to exist among the stars." "Better?" Crexthul's red eyes blazed with anger. "They show us chaos. They show us the destruction of order. If every species began acting like these humans, launching missions to help strangers, interfering in the natural progression of conquest and survival, our entire civilization would collapse." The debate continued for hours. Some species saw humanity's actions as inspiring. Others saw them as a threat to the established order of the galaxy. But all of them agreed on one thing. These humans were unlike any species they had ever encountered. Meanwhile, the Liberty continued its desperate race through space. Maria Santos worked without sleep, constantly adjusting the engines to keep them running. Dr. Wong prepared medical equipment for patients she couldn't imagine. Danny Chun tried to decode more of the alien signal, hoping to understand what they would find when they arrived. Captain Rick Thompson barely left the bridge. He knew that every decision he made could mean the difference between saving 50,000 lives or losing his own crew in empty space. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. "How much longer?" he asked Tom Baker. 36 hours, sir, if the engines hold together." Rick nodded and looked out at the stars streaming past. Somewhere ahead in the darkness, aliens were dying. They had sent out a desperate signal, not knowing if anyone would hear it or care enough to respond. But humanity had heard, and humanity was coming. The Liberty pushed harder through space, its experimental engines, straining against the laws of physics. Every minute brought them closer to their destination, and closer to an encounter that would change the galaxy forever. In the cargo holds, Steve Rodriguez checked their supplies one more time. Food, water, medicine, tools, and spare parts filled every available space. It was everything they could carry, everything they thought the aliens might need. He had no way of knowing that. What the aliens would need most was something that couldn't be packed in a cargo hold. Hope. The knowledge that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, strangers cared enough to risk everything to help them. The Liberty flew on through the night between stars, carrying 200 human souls toward an uncertain destiny. Behind them, Earth waited and prayed. Ahead of them, 50,000 aliens counted down their final hours. And watching from hidden places throughout the galaxy, ancient civilizations wondered what kind of species would gamble everything on compassion. The Liberty dropped out of light speed with a violent shudder that shook the entire ship. Captain Rick Thompson gripped his command chair as the stars stopped streaking past and became points of light again. After 3 days of racing through space, the sudden stillness felt strange. "Status report," he called out. "We're in the Kepler 442 system," reported Tom Baker from navigation. "Scanning for the alien ship now." Danny Chun worked frantically at his communication station. "I'm picking up their distress signal. It's much stronger now. They're close." On the main screen, a massive shape appeared in the darkness. The alien ship was enormous, at least twice the size of the Liberty. But even from a distance, they could see that something was terribly wrong. The ship drifted without power, its hull scarred and blackened. No lights showed in its windows. "Are they still alive?" Rick asked quietly. Danny listened to his headphones, trying to make sense of the alien signals. "I'm getting very weak transmissions. Someone's still broadcasting, but barely." Maria Santos looked up from her engineering station, her face grim. "Captain, their power readings are almost zero. Whatever's keeping them alive won't last much longer." Rick made his decision immediately. "Tom, take us alongside their ship. Danny, open a channel on all frequencies. Use the mathematical sequences." From their original signal, the Liberty moved closer to the dying alien vessel. As they approached, they could see through some of the transparent sections into the ship's interior. Tall, thin figures moved slowly through dimly lit corridors. Even at a distance, it was clear they were weak and struggling. Danny's voice was tense with concentration. "I'm broadcasting our mathematical sequences now, adding pictures showing that we want to help." For several minutes, there was no response. Then the alien ship's communication system crackled to life. The voice that came through was unlike anything humans had ever heard. It was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but filled with exhaustion and despair. "This is Chief Navigator Veltar of the Eternal Dawn," the voice said, speaking in perfect mathematical concepts that Danny's computers could translate. "We do not understand. Who are you? Why have you come?" Rick stepped forward to the communications panel. "This is Captain Rick Thompson of the Earthship Liberty. We received your distress signal. We've come to help you." There was a long silence. Then Veltar's voice came back, filled with amazement. You traveled between the stars. To help us? We are strangers to you." "That doesn't matter," Rick said simply. "You needed help. We came." Another pause. When Veltar spoke again, his musical voice was thick with emotion. "Captain Thompson, we are dying. Our engines are dead. Our life support fails. We have perhaps 6 hours of air remaining for 50,000 souls. "We have engineers and doctors," Rick replied. "We have supplies and equipment. May we come aboard your ship? You would risk your lives for strangers?" Rick looked around the bridge at his crew. Every face showed the same determination. Yes, we would. Dr. Patricia Wong was already preparing her medical team. She had no idea what alien biology would be like, but she was ready to try everything she knew. Steve Rodriguez was organizing supply teams to carry medicine and equipment to the alien ship. The first humans to board an alien vessel were Rick Thompson, Maria Santos, Dr. Wong, and a team of engineers and medics. They put on spacesuits and crossed between the ships through a hastily rigged airlock. The inside of the Eternal Dawn was beautiful and strange. The corridors were tall and curved, designed for beings much taller than humans. Soft lights glowed from the walls themselves, though many were now dim or completely dark. The air was thin and cold, filled with the sharp smell of failing life. Support systems. Chief Navigator Veltar met them at the airlock. He was over 7 feet tall, with silver skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. His large eyes were dark and sad, but they widened with wonder when he saw the humans. "You are so small," he said softly, "and you came so far." Dr. Wong stepped forward, her medical scanner already working. "We need to see your sick and injured first. Can you show us to your medical areas?" Veltar led them through the ship, and what they saw broke their hearts. Thousands of Zephyrians lay on beds or on the floor, weak from radiation poisoning and breathing the thin, contaminated air. Children cried softly, while their parents tried to comfort them. Elderly Zephyrians sat quietly, preparing to die with dignity. Dr. Wong knelt beside a young Zephyrian child whose silver skin had turned pale gray. Her scanner showed radiation damage throughout the child's body. She looked up at the alien medic, Helrain, who had been caring for the patients with no medicine and failing equipment. "Can you understand me?" she asked. Helrain nodded. Like all Zephyrians, she was tall and graceful, but her hands shook with exhaustion. "I understand her mathematical language, but I do not understand why you are here." "We're here to help," Dr. Wong said simply. She opened her medical kit and began working. Human medicine on alien biology was dangerous, but doing nothing was certain death. Meanwhile, Maria Santos was in the engine room with Mortek, the Zephyrian chief engineer. The massive alien engines were completely cold, their power systems fried beyond repair. "Can you show me how these work?" Maria asked. Mortek explained the alien technology as best he could. The Zephyrian engines used principles that human science barely understood, but Maria was one of the best engineers Earth had ever produced. She studied the alien systems and began to see how they worked. "Your power coupling here," she said, pointing to a massive device. "It's burned out. But if I reroute power from our ship through this junction..." She began pulling tools from her kit. "That should not work," Mortek said, watching her. "Your technology and ours are completely different." "Maybe," Maria said, already connecting human power cables to alien systems. "But energy is energy. Let's see what happens." What happened was a miracle of engineering. Maria's jury-rigged connections worked, sending power from the Liberty into the Eternal Dawn's failing systems. Lights began to flicker on throughout the alien ship. The air circulation systems started working again. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Wong was having her own breakthrough. Human radiation medicine, carefully adjusted, was actually helping the poisoned Zephyrians. The chemistry was different, but the basic principles were the same. "It's working," Helrain whispered, watching as the young child's color began to improve. "Your medicine, it helps us." Dr. Wong smiled, even though the alien couldn't see it through her helmet. "We're not so different after all." For the next 24 hours, The human crew worked without rest. Engineers crawled through alien machinery, making repairs that shouldn't have been possible. Doctors treated patients whose biology they barely understood. Supply teams carried food, water, and medicine between the ships. Captain Rick Thompson found himself working alongside Veltar, coordinating the massive rescue effort. The alien navigator was amazed by what he saw. "Your people," Veltar said, watching a human engineer risk his life to repair a dangerous power coupling. "They work as if our lives matter as much as their own." "They do," Rick said. "Life is life, no matter where it comes from." Danny Chun spent his time learning the Zephyrian language and teaching them English. The aliens were fascinated by human music and art, though they found human emotions almost overwhelming in their intensity. "You feel so strongly," a young Zephyrian named Kilvin told him. "When you are happy, you shine like stars. When you are sad, you darken like dying suns. It is beautiful and terrible." The breakthrough came when Maria finally got the alien engines working again. It took a combination of human technology and alien science, held together with what she called creative engineering, and everyone else called impossible. "Engines are online," she announced over the radio. "Life support is stable. We've got full power restored." A cheer went up from both ships. 50,000 Zephyrians had been saved from certain death by 200 humans who had traveled across the galaxy to help strangers. Dr. Wong had treated over 3,000 patients. By the time the crisis was over, most would recover completely. The children, especially, responded well to the combination of human medicine and restored life support. As the immediate danger passed, the two species began to truly meet each other. The Zephyrians were amazed by human technology, art, and music. Humans were fascinated by Zephyrian philosophy, poetry, and their deep understanding of the universe. "We have traveled the stars for generations," Veltar told Rick as they stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Dawn, looking out at the stars. "We have studied the cosmos, written songs about its beauty, and dreamed of meeting other minds among the darkness. But we never imagined we would meet beings like you." "What do you mean?" Rick asked. "Beings who would risk everything for strangers. Beings whose first instinct is not to conquer or claim territory, but to help. In all our study of the cosmos, we never dreamed such a species could exist." Rick looked out at the stars, thinking about Earth and all the humans who had worked to make this rescue possible. "Maybe we're not so special. Maybe we just got lucky to hear your signal." Veltar turned his large, dark eyes toward the human captain. "Captain Thompson, you do not understand. We have been monitoring galactic communications for decades. When species first achieve interstellar travel, they focus inward. The Liberty returned to Earth as heroes. Every television station on the planet carried live coverage as the ship approached Earth orbit. Captain Rick Thompson and his crew had done the impossible. They had saved 50,000 alien lives and brought humanity into contact with its first extraterrestrial civilization. President Catherine Wells stood at the podium in the White House press room, addressing the world. "Today marks a new chapter in human history," she said to the crowd of reporters and the billions watching around the globe. "We have proven that compassion knows no boundaries, not even the vast distances between the stars." The success of the rescue mission transformed Earth overnight. Countries that had been enemies worked together to establish the Human Interstellar Relief Corps. The best scientists, engineers, and doctors from every nation volunteered to join missions that would help other species in need. Dr. Patricia Wong became the head of the new Xenobiology Institute, dedicated to understanding alien medicine and biology. Maria Santos was promoted to lead the Advanced Engineering Division, working on technology that could bridge the gap between human and alien systems. But the most important change was the arrival of Ambassador Veltar, the Zephyrian leader, came to Earth aboard a beautiful ship that seemed to be made of living crystal. When he stepped out of his shuttle at the United Nations building in New York, people around the world watched in amazement. Here was proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. Veltar was tall and graceful, his silver skin glowing softly in Earth's sunlight. His large, dark eyes took in everything around him with wonder. "Your world is so vibrant," he told President Wells during their first meeting. "So full of life and energy. My people tend to be quiet and thoughtful, but you? Humans burn like bright stars." The cultural exchange began immediately. Zephyrian poetry and philosophy fascinated human scholars. Their music, which sounded like wind chimes and flowing water, became popular around the world. In return, humans shared their art, literature, and especially their music. The Zephyrians were amazed by human emotional expression. "When you sing," Veltar told a group of musicians at Lincoln Center, "I can feel your souls touching the cosmos. It is beautiful and overwhelming." But not everyone in the galaxy was pleased with humanity's actions. Deep in space, in a massive fortress that orbited a dead star, General Thakmor of the Dominion studied reports about the human rescue mission. He was a terrifying figure, even by Dominion standards. His scales were black as night, his claws could cut through steel, and his red eyes glowed with barely controlled rage. "Explain this to me again," he growled to his intelligence officer. Commander Vextar shuffled his feet nervously. The humans received a distress signal from an unknown species. Instead of ignoring it or using it to track down a weak target, they launched a rescue mission. They risked their most advanced ship and 200 of their best people to save strangers. And they succeeded? Yes, General. They saved all 50,000 Zephyrians. Not only that, they've established diplomatic relations and are sharing technology. Thakmor slammed his massive fist on the table, leaving cracks in the metal surface. This is unacceptable. For millennia, the galaxy has operated on simple principles. The strong conquer the weak. Species expand by taking what they need from others. Order is maintained through strength and fear. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at his fleet of warships. Now these humans come along and change everything. They save strangers. They give away technology. They act as if every life in the galaxy matters equally. "General," Vextar said carefully, "perhaps they are simply naive. A young species that doesn't understand how the galaxy works." "No," Thakmor said, his voice low and dangerous. "This was not naivety. This was a calculated act of defiance against the natural order. They are telling the galaxy that there is another way to exist among the stars." He turned back to his intelligence officer. "And if that idea spreads, if other species begin to think that compassion is more powerful than conquest, our entire civilization will collapse." The Dominion was not the only power taking notice of humanity's actions. In the ethereal realm of pure energy where the collective existed, beings of light discussed what they had witnessed. "The humans show promise," said Entity Prime, whose thoughts glowed like distant stars. "They demonstrate that young species can choose cooperation over competition." "But they are still crude," replied Entity 7. "Their emotions are so strong, so chaotic. They feel everything with such intensity that it overwhelms their logic." "Perhaps," Entity Prime mused, "that intensity is exactly what the galaxy needs. We have become too distant, too removed from the simple truth that all consciousness is precious." The collective decided to attempt contact with humanity, but their attempts were blocked by Dominion interference. Every time they tried to send a message to Earth, Dominion ships would intercept it or jam the transmission. On Earth, intelligence agencies began detecting unusual activity in space around the solar system. Commander Kevin Blake, who had been promoted to head the new Space Intelligence Division, briefed President Wells on what they were seeing. "Madam President, we're tracking at least 50 alien ships in the outer system. They're maintaining their distance, but they're definitely watching us." President Wells studied the star charts showing the alien positions. "Are they hostile?" "We don't know. Some seem to be trying to communicate with us, but their signals are being jammed by other ships. It's like there are two different groups out there, and they don't agree about whether to talk to us." Admiral Frank Hayes, now in charge of Earth's expanding space defense forces, was worried. "The Zephyrians have been sharing intelligence with us. According to them, the galaxy is divided into several major powers. The most dangerous is something called the Dominion." "What do we know about them?" the president asked. Velter, who had been invited to the briefing, spoke up. "The Dominion controls much of this region of the galaxy. They believe that strength is the only thing that matters. They conquer weaker species and force them to serve. They see your rescue of my people as a threat to their way of life." "Because we helped you instead of enslaving you?" "Exactly. By showing compassion to strangers, you have demonstrated that there is an alternative to their philosophy of conquest. If other species begin to follow your example, the Dominion's power will crumble." President Wells felt a chill. "Are you saying they might attack us?" "I fear it is very likely," Veltar said sadly. "The Dominion does not tolerate challenges to their authority." The first sign of real trouble came 3 weeks later. A Zephyrian transport ship traveling from their new homeworld to Earth was attacked by unknown vessels. The ship was destroyed, and all aboard were killed. Among the dead was Hellrain, the medic who had worked alongside Dr. Wong during the rescue. The attack sent shockwaves through both human and Zephyrian communities. Dr. Wong attended the memorial service on the Zephyrian homeworld, speaking about her brief time working with Hellrain. "She taught me that healing transcends species," Wong said to the gathered mourners. "In those desperate hours aboard the Eternal Dawn, we were not human and Zephyrian. We were simply beings trying to preserve life." Captain Rick Thompson, who had been promoted to admiral in charge of the new interstellar fleet, met with his senior staff to discuss the attack. "The debris pattern suggests Dominion weapons," reported Commander Lisa Grant, the fleet's intelligence officer. "But there were no witnesses, and no one claimed responsibility." "They're testing us," Rick said grimly, "seeing how we respond to the murder of our allies." The response was swift and decisive. President Wells announced the formation of a joint human-Zephyrian defense pact. Earth shipyards, working with Zephyrian technology, began building a new class of starships designed for both rescue and protection. But other species were watching too. The trader guilds that moved goods between star systems began quietly changing their routes to avoid Dominion space. Independent colonies started asking for protection from the growing human-Zephyrian alliance. Most importantly, the peaceful ethereal collective finally managed to get a message through to Earth. The transmission was brief and beautiful, a mathematical poem that expressed friendship and hope. "We have watched your actions with great interest," the message said. "Your species shows wisdom beyond your years. We would like to offer you guidance as you navigate the dangerous currents of galactic politics." But the message was intercepted by Dominion forces, who traced it back to its source. A collective research station was destroyed in retaliation. Its energy being scattered into the cosmic wind, the galaxy was choosing sides. On Zephyria Nova, the new homeworld where Veltar had settled his people, children learned songs about the brave humans who had saved them. Artists created sculptures showing human and Zephyrian hands reaching across the stars toward each other. On Earth, schools began teaching courses about alien cultures and interstellar relations. Children who had grown up thinking they were alone in the universe now knew that somewhere among the stars there were friends who had needed help and enemies who hated them for providing it. The Human Interstellar Relief Corps launched its second missing when they received a distress call from a mining colony in the Tau Ceti system. This time, they were prepared for trouble. The alarms began screaming across Earth's Space Command centers at 3:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Admiral Rick Thompson was pulled from sleep by the emergency alert on his bedside communicator. "Sir, you need to get to headquarters immediately," came the voice of his aide. "We have a massive fleet approaching the outer system." Rick was dressed and in his car within 5 minutes. As he drove through the empty streets of Colorado Springs toward Space Command, he could see people coming out of their houses to look up at the sky. Word was already spreading. Earth was under attack. At headquarters, the main situation room buzzed with activity. Giant screens showed the approaching Dominion fleet, 3,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, moving steadily toward Earth. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy. "How long until they reach us?" Rick asked, as he took his position at the command center. 18 hours at their current speed," reported Intelligence Chief Kevin Blake. "General Thekmer is leading them personally aboard their flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds." Rick looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. 200 human ships, including the Liberty, 50 Zephyrian vessels that had arrived. Over the past months, a handful of ships from the other species that had joined their alliance. Against 3,000 Dominion warships, it wasn't even close to being a fair fight. "Have we heard from the other species in our alliance?" Rick asked. "The Kethran are sending what ships they can, but they're miners, not warriors. The Ethereal Collective is trying to help, but they exist mostly as energy beings. Their ships are designed for exploration, not combat." President Catherine Wells arrived at the command center an hour later, having been flown in from Washington. She looked at the approaching fleet with grim determination. "Options?" she asked simply. "We could surrender," suggested one of the generals. "Negotiate terms." "The Dominion doesn't negotiate," Beltar said. He had been staying at the command center since the fleet was detected. "They conquer or they destroy. There is no middle ground." "And we fight," the president said. "Admiral Thompson, you have full authority to defend our world." Rick nodded and began issuing orders. The human fleet moved to intercept the Dominion forces near Luna, Earth's moon. It would be better to fight the battle there than in Earth orbit, where debris from destroyed ships could threaten the planet below. As the human fleet took position, Rick opened a communication channel to all ships. "This is Admiral Thompson to all vessels. Today we face an enemy that wants to destroy us not because of anything we've done wrong, but because of something we've done right. We saved lives. We showed compassion to strangers. We proved that there's a better way to exist among the stars." He paused, looking out at the approaching enemy fleet. "They outnumber us 15 to 1. They have bigger ships and more powerful weapons, but they don't have what we have. They don't fight for each other. They don't believe that every life has value. They don't know what it means to risk everything for strangers." On ships throughout the human fleet, crews listened to their admiral's words. Dr. Patricia Wong was aboard the medical ship Mercy, preparing to treat the wounded from the coming battle. Maria Santos commanded the engineering vessel Repair, ready to keep damaged ships fighting. Danny Chun was on the communications ship Unity, coordinating between the different species in their alliance. "Today we fight not just for Earth," Rick continued, "but for the idea that compassion is stronger than conquest, that helping others is more important than helping ourselves, that the galaxy can be a place where all beings are valued and protected." The Dominion fleet arrived 12 hours early, coming out of hyperspace in a massive wall of black metal and red lights. General Thekmer's flagship was at the center, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons designed to crack planets in half. Thekmer opened a communication channel to the human fleet. "Humans of Earth," his voice boomed across space, "you have violated the natural order of the galaxy. You have interfered with the progression of conquest and survival that has governed the cosmos for millions of years. For this crime, your species will be eliminated." Rick responded calmly, "General Thekmer, we have committed no crime except caring about others. If that threatens your empire, then maybe your empire deserves to fall." "Your naive compassion ends today," Thekmer snarled. "Attack!" The Dominion fleet surged forward like a wave of destruction. Their massive ships fired energy weapons that could melt asteroids, launching missiles that could destroy cities. The human fleet was vastly outnumbered, but they had advantages the Dominion didn't expect. Human ships were designed with lessons learned from the rescue mission. They were fast, adaptable, and built to work together. More importantly, they were crewed by people who believed in what they were fighting for. The Liberty, with Rick commanding. From the bridge led a group of smaller ships against the Dominion's left flank. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Maria Santos, commanding the engineering ship repair, performed miracles of battlefield mechanics. When the destroyer Columbia took heavy damage, she maneuvered her ship alongside and began making repairs even while under enemy fire. "This is insane," her chief engineer called out as Dominion weapons fire exploded around them. "Yeah," Maria replied, welding a hull breach while laser fire lit up space around her. "But it's the right kind of insane." The battle raged for hours, and slowly the human fleet began to fall back. They were fighting bravely, but they simply didn't have enough ships. One by one, human vessels were destroyed or too damaged to continue fighting. Then something unexpected happened. A new fleet emerged from hyperspace near Jupiter. Not Dominion ships, but vessels from dozens of different species. The Traitor Coalition had come, bringing cargo ships hastily converted into warships. Independent colonies sent whatever vessels they could spare. Even some species that had never heard of humans before arrived, drawn by the stories of beings who would risk everything for strangers. "This is Captain Morken of the free trader vessel Star Wanderer," came a transmission. "We stand with the humans. Captain Yul Resh of the Outer Colony Defense Force. We're here to help. Commander Zeke of the Independent Miners Guild. Nobody threatens the humans on our watch." The galaxy had chosen sides, and more species had chosen compassion over conquest than anyone had expected. The battle turned into a massive free-for-all as hundreds of ships from dozens of species joined the fight. The Dominion fleet, used to facing single planets or small fleets, found itself surrounded by a coalition unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But the tide really turned when the ethereal collective arrived. They came not in ships, but as beings of pure energy, flowing through space like rivers of living light. They couldn't fight in the traditional sense, but they could do something else. They could disable the Dominion's weapons by overloading their energy systems. Collective to human fleet came a transmission that sounded like singing stars. "We offer our assistance to those who value all consciousness." Streams of energy flowed from the collective beings into the Dominion ships, causing their weapons to shut down and their shields to fail. A massive Dominion fleet found itself defenseless against the coalition that had formed around humanity. The final moment came when Veltar, commanding the Zephyrian flagship Eternal Gratitude, positioned his ship directly in front of General Thekmer's dreadnought. "This is for all the beings you have enslaved," Veltar said over the communication channel. "This is for all the worlds you have conquered. This is for showing the galaxy that strength alone is not enough." The Eternal Gratitude, supported by energy from the collective and covering fire from human ships, unleashed everything it had at the Dominion flagship. The Destroyer of Worlds, the ship that had conquered dozens of star systems, broke apart. In a cascade of explosions, General Thakmer's final transmission was filled with rage and confusion. "This is impossible. Compassion cannot defeat strength. Weakness cannot overcome power." "You're wrong," Rick replied as he watched the enemy flagship die. "Compassion isn't weakness. It's the strongest force in the universe." The remaining Dominion ships, seeing their leader defeated and surrounded by enemies, began to surrender or flee. The battle was over, and the coalition had won. In the aftermath, the galaxy was transformed. The Galactic Relief Alliance was formally established, with representatives from over 100 species. Their mission was simple: to help anyone in the galaxy who needed it, regardless of species, location, or politics. Earth became the center of this new alliance, not because humans demanded it, but because other species insisted on it. "You showed us the way," Veltar told President Wells during the Alliance's founding ceremony. "It's only right that you lead us forward." The Dominion still existed, but their power was broken. Many of their conquered worlds declared independence and joined the Relief Alliance. Others simply stopped paying tribute and sending slaves. The empire that had ruled through fear discovered that fear wasn't stronger than hope. Rick Thompson, now promoted to Supreme Admiral of the Alliance fleet, stood on the observation deck of the new headquarters station orbiting Earth. Through the windows, he could see ships from 100 different worlds, all working together. Dr. Wong had established. Medical Shoe,